I'm going to be introducing our next speaker now, which is Sandra Benson from AWS. And I also had a chance to talk to Sandra about a week or so ago, and I was asking her what she's really loved about COVID. And the thing she said that she's really loved being invited into other people's homes and seeing what they're like. She said that she actually had one of her colleagues who, like, in the office is like fully straight-laced, and when he had his Zoom call on, his house is just like filled with Harley Davidson memorabilia. And she's like, I just never knew that that's what he was like. And so I asked her, what would people be surprised to see, in her house? And she said, look, to be honest, most people would just be surprised to see a blonde woman in construction. Fair enough. With that introduction out the way, please welcome to the screen, Sandra Benson.
Thank you for your time. As you heard, my name is Sandra Benson. I have what I think is probably one of the best titles in the entire world, and it is Worldwide Head of Engineering, Construction, and Real Estate. So that sounds pretty cool, pretty neat. I'm trying to get the slides to move, guys. Let's try it this way. Okay, good. So what that means, though, it doesn't mean that I'm one to call if you'd like to do some work on Amazon's facilities. I do have influence there, but I am on AWS, which is the technology side, right? So a little bit about me. I've been in this industry, let's say over 20 years and pretty close to 30. Electrical engineer by background, got involved in technology, had a couple interesting roles. I was global industry director for engineering construction at Oracle, JD Edwards, and then we did the acquisition of Primavera. CIO for large oil and gas EPC, which was SNC-Lavalin. Some of you may know of who that is. Went to work for Hexagon, which is where I really got into a lot of the EPC, more industrial construction. And then Amazon came calling, and I thought it was really odd. I was like, well, why would Amazon want to talk to me? We do have industry verticals, but I'm not a technology person. So when I was asked to speak to you guys, I thought, well, what would be one thing that maybe I could impart that might be of benefit? Because in my world, I'm just bombarded, and I'm sure you are as well, with, AR, VR, data platform, analytics, cloud computing, cloud storage, virtual desktops, and on and on and on and on. So, and I also looked at what everyone else was doing, and I thought, maybe if I just went through what smart buildings are, what constitutes a smart building and what we're seeing there, maybe that would be a benefit. I do love these virtual things, but I so wish I were there in person because I can't see your face to see if this is interesting, but I hope that it is and that you ask questions. We all know what a smartphone is, and smart buildings are in that same genre. So this is, you probably recognize this guy. He's fairly well known. But what I wanted, the reason I bring this up is just the piece that's highlighted there, which is to empower others to unleash their creativity. And I've been in this industry long enough that I don't know that we are always that creative. And I'm speaking as much about me as I am anyone else. Amy, who, by the way, is a very difficult person to follow. She's like a force of nature, and I'm a little not quite as energetic. But at any rate, but you can see that what she's talking about and what a lot of things we're doing is actually, you think about Amazon as a retailer, but we have a huge technology group. So that's just Jeff. You can see lots of things about him, but this is really the point of that. And that is, there's not anybody that just goes out and buys technology just because, I don't know anyone who goes out and buys a lot of sensors, maybe some drones and various things without having some reason for doing it. Now, there are some computer nerds that like to buy stuff just to play with, but in general, business outcomes, I think, is really what drives that. And that's what drives us. So at AWS and at Amazon itself, if I had more time, I would tell you about it. But you can also Google it. We have something called working backwards. So everything we do, so when I worked for Oracle and some of those guys, we would design a product. And then we say, okay, here's our product now, you should come buy it because it's really great. What we do at AWS and Amazon itself is we work from the customer backwards. What is the customer? What's the outcome the customer is looking to get, and then how do we get there by going backwards? So hopefully that makes some sense. So then we came up with what's called our smart building vision. This vision is not just AWS. This is many of our large clients and even small clients. It includes property management, property managers, owners, contractors. The whole gamut came into this. So I'm not one to read slides to you. I'm sure these are available after, but this was really what our vision was. We thought we needed a vision before we went into it. But I don't know about you, but when I first joined AWS, I have to be honest, I didn't know what a smart building was. I knew what a smartphone was. So since I have to know stuff and I'm pretty detail oriented, I said, okay, well, what does it mean by smart? And honestly, there are four pieces to smart in general. Okay. And what most people are doing now is the first part, right? You see sensors, data capturing, metering. So, there's sensors in your vest or in your hard hats or, those kind of things. That's where most people are. This is a continuum. I'm sure most of you know that I love construction, but it is the least digitized of all industries. I don't think that's because we don't want to be digitized. I think we work on very low margins, so we don't have necessarily the luxury of just investing in technology for technology's sake. But that's where most things are. So you'll see a lot of different things. But if you just have the sensors out there capturing data, it doesn't really do you a lot of good because you got data from this place and this place and this place. Well, that's not going to help you with your business outcome, right? So now we are beginning to see people get into real-time data integration and using historical data. So when I first got in this business 100 years ago, basically it wasn't even called integration. We used to have to write what's called interfaces between one system to the other. So if our estimating system needed to go into our budgeting or costing system, somebody had to write an integration or an interface, and that might take months to be done. And generally by the time it was done, it was of no value. So what I've learned, and it is in the trades as well, but we really need information on where we are at a project at any given time, but we need to know it soon enough so that it's actionable. It doesn't do us a lot of good to get historical data and have real time or have data integration if it's a week late. It's a little late then, right? So what are you going to do? So that's kind of where a lot of people are. So we're seeing people generally in the 1 to 2. But 3 and 4, I think, is really where I'll spend more time on 3 because that's really where we're pushing people to go. So I'm not going to get into a whole lot of things about what the cloud is, but the cloud is what enables a lot of these things. I saw people that I say something about the cloud and they literally still look up. It's really not up there, just in case you need to know. But it does allow us to break those silos and to be able to bring in data very quickly and get to solutions very quickly. There's a lot of other benefits, but those are some. But here's where it really begins to make sense. So if you've gotten the sensors and now you've got your data integrated, now what's next is to do data modeling, analytics, and machine learning. So this is really where you want to take your data and you want to start using algorithms and do some analytics and then machine learning, as that says. But for me, when I first worked with someone, I'm like, okay, I'm not really sure what that means. So the way I look at it is I like to know. So the first thing is analytics, which is what I just said, right? It just tells you where you are at any given point in time. That's great. And honestly, that is a huge leap forward for this business. But ultimately, I'd like for us to start doing predictive. So, for example, predictive maintenance on equipment, right? So that we can predict based on various data modeling or algorithms, different things you want to call that, essentially to give us preventative, let us know things ahead of time. But the ultimate world is actually to become prescriptive. So think about work packaging. If you, I'm sure you've worked with EPCs or GCs, and they come up well as work packaging. We have lots of idle labor because the materials aren't there, or various different things like that. So the machine learning, which then becomes artificial intelligence, but I won't get into the details of the differences there. But essentially, that can go through those algorithms in such a fast way that it could actually come up with a much more, or potentially more optimal way to work package or to schedule or to do the path of construction. The one thing I always try to tell people, and I know, guys, on your side of the world, I know what we call football isn't what you call football. So, US football, we actually use machine learning for our coaches to help come up with the plays. So, if you think about that, and if you think about the fact that machine learning, by taking all this data and using it over and over, actually helps you find the best path to the goal, then think about the possibilities of what that could do for construction. Um, Visualization, single pane of glass, that whole thing, that's somewhat digital twin. I'm not going to spend as much time on that, only, but please feel free to ask questions. The reason I'm not is because honestly, I have very few of our large clients that are in the third step. Most are in the first to second. I will say, particularly the second one, COVID has really increase that. There's a lot of people who've always said, well, we need to get to the cloud. But now it's like, we need to get to the cloud now. Okay. So that's what I think of as I say smart. The other way to look at it is people think differently. So the other way to look at it, if I look at it from a building perspective, is you have a connected building, right? So that just means you've connected all the sensors and that kind of thing. Then you have an intelligent building. So that, if you think about it, goes back to some of our data collection. Then we have a smart building, and the smart building then gives us a full package of what's going on and a full view. And I'll get into some examples of this a little bit later. And then ultimately, there's a vision. I don't know a lot that are quite there yet, but we are seeing some interesting things in some new airports, like in Hong Kong, that actually they become self-aware. And again, that's not much different than being prescriptive, right? Where the building is not really calling up anyone, but it's making an alert that this is coming up. No, I'm going fast. Smart buildings is a big, big story. So just some things for you to think about. Data it's all about data. Like, I think I read somewhere, someone said that data is the new oil. And it is. You've got to have data. Or you will be behind the times. We obviously, smart physical systems you already have. Most people have lots of different sensors. As I mentioned, they're just generally not connected, so it doesn't do us a lot of good. Real-time insights, and occupant experiences and sustainability. And I'm going to spend just a minute on those two. because occupant experiences, I have to say, honestly, I never really thought much about. When we were out, building an oil rig in Kazakhstan, I really wasn't thinking about an occupant's experience. But from a smart building perspective, if you think about, say you live in a high-rise condominium, the occupant experience is very important. And millennials, if any of you have them, you know that it's all about the experience. That's like, and if it's not a positive experience, it's going on social media. If it is a positive experience, it might go on social media, but it's going to go somewhere. And sustainability is something that when years ago, we always talked about it. And I'm not speaking of Amazon here, just as an industry, but I never really saw us do a lot of it. But that is now a huge issue worldwide. Sure, you're aware of it. So these things called data lakes, and I'll get into some of that later, but the ability to actually plan for and then know what is your carbon footprint, those kinds of things. So here's a few use cases. Again, a lot of this I'm hoping is stuff that you can review on your own if you're interested. But we talked about data, we talked about all those. So underneath here, you can see examples of what those are. This is the time I would normally pause and say, are there any questions? Do you want to talk about a specific one? But I think in this case, we'll just keep going. And then this, for those of you who are really into this, excuse me. Okay. I guess we're going to go to a video. This video has no audio on purpose because I want you to look at it and listen to it. Well, not listen to it because you can't hear it, but I want you to look at it and think about what it's saying. So this is the power of all of those technologies I just mentioned to you. That was one of our partners that built that literally within about 3 days after COVID first came along. And as you can see, it's a lot more than COVID. But that took into account cloud computing, data lakes, sensors, analytics, machine learning, all of the kinds of things I mentioned before. So that is kind of the thing that's nice. You don't have to wait for some developers to sit in a room for weeks or months to develop it. You can get it out there and it's gone and it's working really well. That's just one solution, but that's like a real live solution. It seems like appropriate in this given time. So for those of you who are really, really want to get into detail, these are some more use cases, and these came from our clients. I'm certainly don't think I want to read those to you, but I think it's kind of interesting for you to take some time and review them, because since you guys are in the trades, you're going to be faced with this every day, and it's going to continue. It's not going to slow down, I don't think. These are some of the outcomes, though. So I do like to talk about this one because we talked about use cases. But if we talk about outcomes, that's a whole lot different, right? So we already know that business owners want to do things faster, cheaper, that whole thing, right? And you guys as contractors are really challenged to innovate, to continue to be competitive. And so there is that. Also, owners and property managers don't want downtime. That. So the more technology we can use, the better it is for you. Supply chain. Supply chain is one of my, it's something I spent a lot of time in my career on. When I was working on my thesis, I was actually working on supply chain for a construction industry. So if you think about supply chain, we always used to say, well, you can't use the manufacturing model because what we do is different and every project's different. And that's all true, absolutely true. But we are seeing more and more companies bringing in chief digital officers, people like that from other industries. And if you think about it, arguably, Amazon is one of the best supply chain companies there is. So it is really with a lot of pleasure that I've gotten to really understand their supply chain process and their logistics and distribution process, and beginning to see how I can work with that with my clients. If you ever get the chance to go to an Amazon fulfillment center, I encourage you to go. It is somewhat mind-boggling. So we already know security is also an issue. A lot of people are concerned about if it's in the cloud, is it secure? So I am not here to sell you on AWS or suggest that you do anything with us, but please make sure when you do go to a cloud provider that it is someone that is well recognized and has good security. You do not want hacks. I know you know that. You don't need me to tell you that. These are just a few of some of our clients. There are a lot more. We're seeing more. These are, as you can tell, more and more owners. And the owners are pretty much driving this. I'd like to say the GCs are driving it, but that's not what I'm seeing. The other piece that we see a lot right now is the concept of smart cities. You hear about smart cities all the time, but you can't have smart cities unless you have smart buildings. So the public sector, if you will, is pushing more smart cities, but you can't do it without that, right? We also have smart roads. The M35 over in London was just completed, and it's in theory the most technologically advanced piece of roadway. Now, I don't know. The Brits can sometimes embellish, so I don't know, but that's theoretically. So how does all this come together? Well, this is pretty much the three things. So IoT and Edge. I'm just going to tell you quickly what that is. It's interesting cocktail conversation, if nothing else. IoT stands for Internet of Things. I think you probably knew that, but that includes drones, virtual reality. It's a huge group of things. Edge is really important. It's not something you hear talked about a lot. And edge computing is essentially, let's say that you're out in some really remote area. One of the challenges you have is you don't have internet access, right? Well, we have these things that literally are right within your mind or wherever it is, and it's called edge computing. A lot more I could talk to you about that. Analytics, as we talked about, is pretty much pulling all the data together, telling you where you are. And then, of course, my favorite is you already have all the information, so now let's use it to make decisions on. And so these are just some of the technologies. I essentially just went through them, but you see some others. Voice I didn't talk about, but I'm guessing most of you have an Alexa or a Siri or something. So you're probably pretty familiar with that. Computer vision is a whole new thing. There's lots of cool things going on for that, but one simple case on that is literally just theft and security, but there's a lot more. Computer vision could also be using eye scans, retinal scans, to let people, to see if they're approved to come in instead of looking at a little tag, that kind of thing. And data lakes. I didn't really spend a lot of time on data lakes. You'll hear data lakes, you'll hear data platforms. From a non-technical perspective, the way I learned it is it's just we're putting a whole bunch of data into a lake, so to speak, or if it's a recipe, you're putting a lot of ingredients in there, mixing it all up so that that information will come back out. Some stats for you is we think that IoT, this isn't us actually, this is from McKinsey, that IoT is the next digital transformation. So if you're not involved with IoT now, You will be soon. I'm sure you are some. So, but I would encourage you to spend some time kind of learning a little bit more of what that is. So, what does IoT do? Sorry, guys, my mouse is not doing a good job for me today. So, building automation, we talked about that. And then with that, you have the connected sensors and devices. These are some of the ones we talked about. There's a lot more. These are just some. You see the lighting systems. I would think HVAC systems would be pretty interesting to you guys. So all of these kinds of things are being used today. These things are real. So this part of IoT is real. Where I think we're not on, as I said earlier, in the digital journey, is I don't think we're to the AI ML really making use of the data, generally because they're not connected. And what I will say is if you're going back and talking to your IT people or something about wanting to get more involved in this, they have to modernize their systems. That's the one piece no one wants to talk about, but it's important. So why would we use IoT for building management services? I think you can, this just kind of gives you a traditional versus IoT. I like it. We actually have some dollars and statistics we've done with a couple really large clients, but we're under NDA, so I can't give you those, but they are quite impressive. But I thought by just kind of telling you, this is high or low or moderate, you kind of got the same idea. Security, between COVID and the civil unrest that's going on in the US and heaven only knows China and all kinds of things, security and monitoring is key. So data security is important, but your building security is equally important. And you'll see a lot of these kinds of things, the audio, image recognition, that kind of stuff. All right. So I've got to get a new mouse. All right. So I'm going to give you an example of a high rise. So let's think about, I'm doing this on purpose. I live in a high rise. I live on the 25th floor of a high rise here in Atlanta. And as I mentioned, I never thought about comfort, or the experience. And I think part of that's because I'm not a millennial, but right now that's a big deal. It's all about the experience. So just going to give you just an idea here. So, there's the person that doesn't say Starbucks, but you get the idea. They want to, they're looking for a place and they want to make sure it has all the latest technology and the things that you would expect. And these are some of the kinds of things we're seeing. Voice, obviously you use Alexa now, but Alexa can be used in businesses to do meeting minutes. Alexa can, not just Alexa, any voice recognition can do lots of sensors. So let's say that the tenant's moved out. That's going to trigger a whole series of things. It may trigger turning off the HVAC and lowering the shades and all that. So that whole thing is in there. Booking facilities, conference rooms, workout equipment, all of those kind of things. Virtual concierge, if you will. I have a concierge downstairs. I had to pick up the phone and call when I want something. And frequently I'm on hold. So virtual concierges would be kind of a nice thing. I have to say we're not quite there here in Atlanta yet, but and not sure if you are actually in Australia, but I would love to hear if you are. So I went through that pretty quickly, but I needed to finish. So we had a few minutes for Amy and I to talk about the diversity issue. But I hope you found that informative, and the slides I think have a lot more detail. And if you have questions, I am happy to answer them for you. So thank you for letting me talk to you about technology.